So this is Tuesday, December the 16th, and J.D. Vance, President of the United States, is going to come out and talk about, guess what? Conspiracy. Now, this makes me laugh because they all know that conspiracy is just a regular part of history. And eventually, someone with some credentials is going to come out and acknowledge that conspiracy is not just a theory, it is a reality, and it does intervene in history. So let's listen in on this interview.
And that is the interviews that White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles gave to Vanity Fair, in which she's quoted as referring to you as, excuse me, and again, not my words, sir, but a conspiracy theorist of a decade, and described your transformation from someone who once opposed President Trump to now his vice president as an act of political expediency. And I'd like to give you the chance to respond to that, sir.
Well, first of all, if Susie, I'll trust what you said. I haven't looked at the article. I of course have heard about it, but conspiracy theorist. Sometimes I am a conspiracy theorist, but I only believe in the conspiracy theories that are true. And by the way, Susie and I have joked in private and in public about that for a long time. For example, I believed in the crazy conspiracy theory back in 2020 that it was stupid to mask 3-year-olds at the height of the COVID pandemic, that we should actually let them develop some language skills. You know, I believed in this crazy conspiracy theory that the media and the government were covering up the fact that Joe Biden was clearly unable to do the job. And I believed in the conspiracy theory that Joe Biden was trying to throw his political opponents in jail rather than win an argument against his political opponents. So, at least on some of these conspiracy theories, it turns out that a conspiracy theory is just something that was true 6 months before the media admitted it. And that's my understanding. Now, look, I do want to say something about Susie, though, because, again, having not read this article, Susie is a person I've come to know very, very well. And, you know, a lot of you probably ask yourself, what is it like behind the scenes? What's going on actually behind the scenes of the Trump administration? And I'll tell you, the president is exactly in private who he is in public.
Okay. So finally, someone's coming out and saying, you know what? The stuff called conspiracy is basically people trying to change history and trying to change it quietly and behind the backs of the American public, or even the ones to whom the conspiracy is directed. Now, I laugh because J.D. Vance, as well as most Americans, would send their children to our educational system to learn about what we call the American Revolution. Now, isn't it interesting that it's never brought up about conspiracy, that in New England there were folks who met quietly and secretly to figure out a way to get out from under the rule of the English king and his oppressive ways. And so anybody today now that talks about conspiracy is some kind of a crazy person. And yet, the history books teach about the American Revolution. Why don't we call it the American Conspiracy? And we could go on and on and on. In England, they have their gunpowder plot against the Queen. Russia, you had your Bolsheviks and your Lenin to throw down government of the czars and then the established government that arose and to establish communism. And yet, conspiracy is a theory. And anybody who's onto it is somehow deranged. Well, why don't we now, people who abide with all this, the lies of the media, say, well, guess what? He's just like all the rest of the nuts, huh? Well, no. J.D. Vance, as well as any of them, as well as the media knows, history is filled with genuine conspiracy. And, furthermore, if you've been following my work, it's on just about every other page of the Bible. In fact, I just read from Psalm 3, and it talks about when David was afraid of Absalom, his own son, because his own son conspired against him for the throne. Psalm 2, a great conspiracy against the Lord and his anointed, namely Jesus. Isaiah 14, Lucifer in heaven. Ezekiel 28. Now I could go on and on and on. So I wanted to show this as kind of a little bit of a relief that finally a public figure is coming out and using the word and saying, you know what? We can talk about it. Furthermore, there are many of them. And furthermore, people who acknowledge them and people who are onto them are not crazy. They're observant and discerning. And may God grant to you discernment of spirits, my friend, so that you realize that right now the entire world, the world system, is conspiring against God Almighty and His holy word and His church, and wants to destroy Christian faith, wants to destroy Christianity, wants to destroy men and women who proclaim Bible truth. So don't you believe the lies. The conspiracies are just theories of wacky people. The Bible is replete with conspiracy. And I'll keep going on and on with it until eventually maybe the message will come around. Thank you for watching. End of video. Thank you for watching. End of video.